The year was 1996. With the release of the Sony PlayStation a year prior, the 16-bit era was coming to an end. I was 13 at the time, walking through a Walmart with my parents and my younger brothers. Suddenly I heard the sound of chirping birds and flowing water. Then I heard a strange voice shouting. I rushed toward the sounds that were coming from the video game section. I turned around the corner and then I saw it. Mario was three-dimensional. Thus began the rise of 3D platformer games. Super Mario 64 was such an amazing success that its formula has been duplicated by many others since. But if I could pick any company that took the 3D platformer formula and then turned it around and created their own game that's just as good as Mario 64, I would have to go with Rareware and their game Banjo-Kazooie. I'm also including Banjo-Tooie because it was an awesome sequel and continuation of the first game. Rareware at the time was already known for creating some of the best games for previous systems. They reached their apex during the Nintendo 64 days, creating games like Diddy Kong Racing, Donkey Kong 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day, 007 GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, Killer Instinct Gold, and of course both Banjo 1 and 2. Then, in 2002, Microsoft acquired Rareware and renamed them Rare. Microsoft did try to make a third Banjo-Kazooie game in 2008, but it just turned into a vehicle construction game and was a far cry from what made the original Banjo games so special. Much of what remained of the Rare team got assigned to the Kinect department, creating mostly sports games for about 5 long years, until 2013, when finally Microsoft let Rare remake their popular fighting game, Killer Instinct. Then in 2015, they released Rare Replay, which was an awesome compilation of 30 games Rare created over the past 30 years. And now in 2019, a remake of Battletoads is set to release, but no real Banjo sequel or even a new Conker game. Thankfully, after Rareware became Rare, Nintendo, Sony, and other third-party publishers made some great 3D platformers to choose from, like Super Mario Sunshine, Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper, Ratchet & Clank, Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, Psychonauts, and more recently Mario Odyssey. But Rareware's absence has always been noticeable to me. That's because the Rareware I once knew is gone forever. But wait, there is another source of hope. It comes in the form of independent studios and successful Kickstarter campaigns. I'm talking about games like A Hat in Time, Poi, the upcoming Clive and Wrench, and of course the spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie, Yooka-Laylee. In 2015, Playtonic Games had a Kickstarter campaign to create a 3D platforming game called Yooka-Laylee. It would be crafted together by some of the greatest developers, composers, and other key personnel who used to once work at Rareware. It was to be a 3D platformer Rarevival. It reached its goal within 40 minutes and ended around $2 million worth from backers, becoming one of the most successful Kickstarters to date. In 2017, Yooka-Laylee finally released to mixed to good reviews, citing issues mainly the camera controls and some of the design choices. What did I think of the game? I loved it from beginning to end. I didn't experience any of the major camera issues that detracted from my overall experience after playing the game upon release. And if you did have camera issues, good news, because they've patched a manual camera option in the menu. As for the design choices, I thought they were great. I loved every world, even Capital Casino. Playtonic Games currently has a staff of around 30 people, and it grew to that size as the game was being developed. Quite a small team considering what they set out to accomplish, so every dollar spent and every minute used during development of this game was precious, even with the help of funds from the successful Kickstarter campaign. Check out the recent Playtonic developer commentary videos and listen to these guys talk about some of the things that went into creating Yooka-Laylee. It is in my opinion that Yooka-Laylee has lived up to its goal of being a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie, and the only thing I was left wanting more of was more worlds and more secrets to discover, so let's hope for a sequel to Yooka-Laylee. It seems that 3D platformers have made somewhat of a comeback, especially in 2017. So, what could be better? Back in 2016, virtual reality really hit the market. Oculus Rift, PlayStation VR, HTC Vive, and others became more affordable and more practical to the average consumer's wallet. I remember some of the VR arcade games back in the 1990s. Oh, and Virtual Boy. We've definitely come a long way. VR has become more popular, but it's still new and hard to describe how awesome playing in VR is until you actually put the headset on for yourself and see the magic, thus making it more difficult to sell to people who've never tried VR. When most people think of playing a game in VR, they think of seeing a virtual world from the first-person perspective, and they wouldn't be entirely wrong, as a huge number of VR games are just that. But not all of them. Getting back to 3D platformers, let's talk about some of those games currently available to play in VR. Astrobot, Lucky's Tale, Moss, Mervils, and Adventure Time Magic Man's Head games. Some of these VR 3D platformers are really good, especially the first three I mentioned. I haven't played Adventure Time yet, but I wanted to still mention it on the list. Out of all these games, only Mervils allows for free camera controls. I really like Mervils. It's a pretty good game, but it feels like a well-made tech demo that happens to be a full game, if that makes sense. Basically, the character movement and overall graphical detail felt a little dated. Then there are the mods that take non-VR games and make them work in VR. I'm talking about Vorpex, Dolphin VR, and other independent mods created by VR enthusiasts. This is an area I've been exploring little by little as things get more technical with modding games that were never intended to be played in VR. So far, during my exploration of VR mods, I found a little mod called Yooka-Laylee. This mod totally turns Yooka-Laylee into a complete VR game. Finally, I found a well-polished VR 3D platformer with free camera controls. I played through the entire game 100%, completing it in VR with the exception of a single Capital Casino mini game called Marble Blow, where for some reason the air wouldn't blow the marble upward. I ended up just loading the game in non-VR, where the air worked just fine. I completed the mini game, and then after saving, I went back to playing in VR. I played entirely using an Xbox One controller, if you wanted to know. Other issues you can expect are: manual aim doesn't shoot where you're aiming. This only makes a couple of the challenges slightly more difficult. Some of the dialogue text may clip through or just be underneath the ground, but this can be adjusted by messing with the VR settings XML file. You'll see some pop-in and also some graphical glitches, especially when you move the camera through a wall. With free camera movement, you'll see places where you're not supposed to, and some areas you'll look at will appear unfinished or missing textures, even though they're really not. Many, if not all, of the entrances and exits should be black, but in VR, what you'll see is whatever texture is behind the black because it's totally missing. so you might not be able to readily identify entrances as they may appear to be walled off. The inept robot lasers are white instead of red. None of the issues that I noticed and mentioned are game-breaking, and my experience was not hindered. In fact, I would argue that this is the definitive way to play Yooka-Laylee or any other 3D platformer. I feel like I'm in the world with Yooka and Laylee. I notice the finer details in each of the worlds and the characters, and I grow even more of an appreciation for the design of this game. If you want, you can also change the perceived scale of the camera to feel as big or as tiny as you want. You can make it feel like you're a giant towering above Yooka and Laylee, or you can make it feel like you're a bug small enough for Yooka to eat. Here are the settings that I prefer. Remember when I mentioned how many people hated the camera controls when Yooka-Laylee first came out? Well, not only can you still switch the camera controls to manual, but having the additional control of the camera by moving your head and looking wherever you want makes platforming and running through the worlds so much easier. This free movement of the camera through VR also works in the minigames and Rextro's arcade, making them all significantly easier. Yooka-Laylee in VR is now my favorite 3D platformer. I love the colorful world design, character models, the dialogue and humor, and the fun of running around collecting, solving puzzles, and completing tasks. As a Banjo-Kazooie nut, this game hits the spot and only left me wanting more. We've come a long way from 2D to 3D, and now I believe that VR is the next phase in gaming. I never thought I'd be playing a 3D platformer in VR and that it could be so amazing. Here is to the future of VR 3D platformers and to the future of gaming.